kind of what was said. So here you can see the start of the thread, which we had our panelists here, which were, as you can see, Amanda Heyman, James Wyatt, Chris Perkins, and Jeremy Crawford. So they started off by giving us all of their history with Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of anecdotes. The beginning part, I'll be honest, was just a lot of background and history and relations to the various panelists to Dungeons and Dragons, which I think from talking to some other people who attended the panel, it hit differently for different folks. I'll say it that way. Some people really enjoyed it. Some people kind of couldn't excuse me, couldn't have cared less. But ultimately, as we got about halfway through, we got the really juicy stuff, which was the content that was coming up for 2024. So basically, it was going through and talking about the different kinds of D&D adventures. They started talking off, as you can see here, about short adventures, which they started with what was mentioned here. Let me just see if I can get this to scroll down. It was Dungeon Magazine. And then they also brought up, a more recent version of short adventures as Journeys Through Radiant Citadel. Then they moved on to the next category, which were adventure campaigns. They mentioned here Tyranny of Dragons, one of their favorite 5th edition adventures. I did think it was interesting that at no point when they talked about this did they mention Kobold Press, who were the people who originally wrote Tyranny of Dragons for Wizards of the Coast. But they also said the basis for Tyranny of Dragons was Dragonlance, because I guess Jeremy and Chris both have a long-standing history and love for Dragonlance, and said, let's make a Dragonlance campaign, but set in, or like use that to sort of inspire it, but let's make it set in the Forgotten Realms. So that was kind of the intent, I guess, of Tyranny of Dragons. We talked a little bit about City of the Spider Queen and the history of James Wyatt getting that, and we moved on to dungeon crawls. I also put in here that I thought the monster manual was going to be the first of the 2024 rule books to be released, because I had heard through the grapevine that there's a 50th anniversary miniature set coming from WizKids, and I heard that that was supposed to launch, I think, around the July timeframe. So I was like, oh, why not release the monster manual alongside the miniatures? And because you could release the monster manual without it being affected by anything else, because you can still use the monsters even with the old content. But that turned out to not be true, which we'll talk about. Again, dungeon crawls. The final category here was, excuse me, story-based adventures. And aside from dungeon crawls, I kind of was like, aren't all adventures story-based? But I guess what they talked about for Ravenloft specifically was, it had a lot of lore that existed before and after the players got there. And that at the time, Strahd was unique because most kind of campaigns had, like, you go into a room and there's monsters waiting for you to attack you, whereas Strahd was a dynamic villain who had his own goals that he was trying to achieve. So encountering him could be random and at different places. And, Jeremy talked about how for Halloween, he would run Ravenloft every year because of the randomization nature of Ravenloft. It was different every time. And Chris Perkins brought up that when working and consulting with Tracy Hickman for writing Curse of Strahd, Tracy Hickman also said that he ran a variety of yearly Ravenloft games, and some of the kind of stuff that happened in those home games of his actually made their way in to help inspire things within Curse of Strahd. We talked a little bit here about Eberron. Then we went into weirdness, which was just odd campaign ideas like Expedition to the Barrier Peaks or Vandelver. And then we got to talking about the future. So first up, we have Descent into the Caverns of, I forget how you pronounce it, but this one you see on here, Chris Perkins said it a couple times and I just forgot. But it is a short adventure anthology set to be played wherever you want to play games. They also said it's designed to be played in one session, and they will be including old school tournament rules, so you'll be able to score to see how you or your table does when playing this adventure. They also mentioned Vecna, Eve of Ruin, which seems to be the new major campaign. I'm also thinking this is going to be the one that releases in, I was going to say that the 50th anniversary miniatures are set around. It's also designed to be a campaign that goes all the way to 20th level. Now, they didn't tell us if it starts at level 1. That's kind of what I'm assuming and hoping, that is a level 1 to 20 campaign. But either way, it is a campaign designed to go to level 20. And then they also said you're going to revisit places and characters from 5e, ones that you've encountered, but also ones from back in the earliest days of D&D. And I don't know about you, but this character here kind of looks like Strahd to me. So I wonder if he's involved. All right, if we scroll down, they also had Quests from the Infinite Staircase, will be another classic anthology series. And there's this character we see on the front who will be able to help us get around the multiverse. And we don't know who they are, but we know that they're an important character. There's also going to be this really cool making of retrospective book called The Making of Original Dungeons and Dragons 1970 to 1976. It'll also have never before seen correspondence between Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson. It's also going to be over 500 pages. We saw our first kind of art of the fighter. This will be the full page art. All classes are going to have a full page art at the start of the player's handbook, aside from, as we can see right here, subclass specific art. If you do zoom in on this, you can see all of the content of the champion subclass here. I may do a separate video comparing what was in the last Unearthed Arcana to what we see here. Now, we were qualified that none of this is final, but it may be worth kind of reading in to see if there's any major changes here versus the last champion in the Unearthed Arcana. They also showed off these backgrounds, but if you might be able to see it on screen, I'm not sure, but right there, it shows that your backgrounds are going to include ability score improvements in them. Seems like it won't be tied to your species, but these look to be prescriptive. They're not like pick one and raise it by 2 and another raise it by 1. These have, like, for example, Charlatan gets a +2 charisma, +1 dexterity. It says every weapon in the player's handbook will be illustrated. We see this official 50 years of D&D logo. It says we'll be hearing more about the 3 core rulebooks going into 2024 with various conventions. The DMG is reorganized, and they did confirm that they have said that it's going to teach you how to write a whole campaign, but that there is a full campaign setting within the Dungeon Master's Guide. I also thought it was interesting that James Wyatt basically flat out called out that the Dungeon Master's Guide from 2014, people only use it to get magic items from and don't use the book for anything else. And their goal is to make this new DMG better than that. Also, again, confirmed that all of the D&D cartoon characters' magic items will be in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Lots of new epic threats that we've heard of. All the monsters are getting tune-ups. Magic items are also getting tune-ups. More sneak peeks and interview videos will be coming as we get closer to the release of the books in 2024, and that was the end of the panel. However, immediately after the panel, the entirety of the panel itself, if you want to watch it for yourself, is available on the D&D YouTube as well as live streamed on the Penny Arcade Twitch. But then I went over to Instagram, and lo and behold, it's not listed there. But if we were to go back to my Twitter, take a look at this. 2024 core rulebooks releasing 5/21/2024. I even said it right there. It says these release dates weren't in the panel. And if you go to the Wizards of the Coast Twitter page and scroll down, you'll see the 50th anniversary. You'll see the you'll see the 2024 Player's Handbook. But it says coming soon. And if you click on it, you'll notice that there is no release date at the bottom. Whereas this image that we received, this was releasing. I don't have all the images. It says releasing 5/21/2024. I believe the Vecna campaign was also listed as 5/21/2024. One of the books was set to come out in June. I think the making of book was set to come out in July. Again, we only saw them for a split second, which I think was just like a mistake on their part to release it. But if this is correct, seems like the Player's Handbook will be available for us in May of next year, which is not a lot of time to finish getting any sort of Unearthed Arcana playtesting in, which I assume at this point means we're pretty much done with it. So let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. It seems as early as May of next year we could be getting the 2024 rulebooks. If you happen to have any of the other pictures showcasing the release dates before they were pulled down, feel free to send them to me and we can make a future video on those or just make a posting about them. And yeah, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.